Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. And notwithstanding any further changes from DICE beyond patch 7.2, what shall be my final video for tips, tricks, and a little bit of advice around how to use the attack helicopters and the stealth helicopters in Season 7. So I have covered both of these vehicles before, so what's the justification for making an additional video? Well, if you didn't see, in patch 7.2, DICE has reduced by 20% the damage from anti-vehicle pods, and they've also reduced by roughly 17% when you do the math, the damage of tow missiles to heavy and medium armor. DICE felt that the changes they'd introduced in patch 5.3 had gone a little bit too far, did say so, and they wanted to try and redress the balance and stop pilots from being able to take out armored vehicles in one cycle or one pass, whichever way you choose to say it. A bit like you're seeing here. Sorry, I couldn't resist, but APS is a thing. Now look, there's a lot to cover in this video and I hope you'll stick around, but if you're not going to, here's the key question. Has DICE stopped me one passing a Wildcat without a gunner backing me up? Nope, but in fairness, I did have to hit every single shot. And while we're at it, Cavs remain just as squishy as they ever did, especially if you hit them from the side. And assuming the main battle tank does absolutely nothing to protect itself, no APS, no real effort to dodge me, you can actually one-pass it, although you have to start from way back. It can be done, but it's very improbable, and we'll get to that in a minute. Generally speaking though, since patch 7.2, the attack helicopters have become two-person vehicles if you want to reliably one-cycle a medium or heavy armored vehicle. And to me this raises a really interesting question. Is the stealth helicopter now a contender to be the best anti-vehicle hunter, particularly as it's been given 2 tow missiles, an upgrade since the last video I did? So if you are inclined to drop early, there's my gift to you. 1, you can still one-cycle everything, although it's very difficult, and 2, the stealth helicopter just might be better than the attack helicopter now at wrecking ground vehicles. You're welcome. However, according to my channel statistics, anybody who's still here at the 3-minute mark typically stays to the end, so now I'm speaking directly to you guys. So in part 1, I want to deal with all things attack helicopter, and I'm going to start with the #1 question I've been asked. Do I have any practical tips for winning aerial duels against Nightbirds? Guys, I will do my best for you. I sincerely hope you find that section useful. If you have any tips of your own, please leave them, help the community because they are really hard to win. I'd also like to share with you some reasons why I personally recommend you should never take the IR missile, such as, but not limited to, being able to take out aerial transports quickly. Tows are very useful. And lastly for the aerial section, something about jet fights I've recently figured out. I was kicking myself I didn't figure it out sooner, but in fairness I've never seen anyone else say it. I really hope you find it useful. Next, I'd like to offer a bit more practical advice about going off the ground vehicles. Jokes aside, it has become significantly more difficult in 7.2, particularly if you're alone. So maybe some practical examples can help new players or anybody who's new to helicopter to boost their success. And finally, just want to give a little bit of advice to people who are trying to counter-attack helicopters with a Stinger missile. I've had my fun over the last 2 years, but I'm just going to help you out a little bit. Part 2 is going to be all about the stealth helicopter, and whilst I will run through the basics of taking out ground vehicles, I'm actually happy with the work I've done on this to date. So what I'd really like to do is spend the bulk of the time promoting what I think is a deeply underrated role, the gunner for the pilot. I bet I can guess what a lot of you are thinking. The gunner seat on the stealth helicopter is useless compared to the attack chopper. And whilst it's true it's not as powerful, it's very far from useless and often saves the vehicle in an air-to-air fight. And in the right situations like going after a tour, the EMP can actually be really useful. Nothing wrong with a little bit of sky piracy. Anyway, that's the structure, but before we get into it, as always, a little bit of housekeeping and something additional. First, I just want to give a personal thanks to T4N. Without their help, there's no way I could have made this video, particularly getting the gunner seat footage if I didn't have such excellent players helping me out. I'll say a bit more at the end about them, but sincerely, thanks guys, I really appreciate it, it's been fun to play. And finally, as I always say, everything in this video is just my opinion, I'm not the law. The whole point of these projects are to share our knowledge and make us all collectively better gamers. It's not about flexing or trying to shout people down, I've got no interest in that. Alright, let's get into it with the number one question I get asked. Do you have any advice for fighting Nightbirds? Here's the best I've got. Everyone, chip in to help if you can. Now here's what I've noticed. Anti-vehicle rocket pods work best when you're firing from a distance of roughly 200-250 meters and firing down. When you fire from a downward angle, they converge almost perfectly on the crosshair like you're seeing here. Only a slight lead is needed from this angle. 2 hits and the Nightbird is done. But when the fight is moving upwards, by which I mean you are either aiming up or you and your opponent are both gaining altitude, then you really have to pitch quite significantly above your target to hit them. The other thing you have to keep in mind is that the Nightbird player is typically going to drift or swing left and right to try and make it more difficult to hit them. Why wouldn't they? So you have to observe and allow for that too, like you're seeing here. See how far to the left I am? So long as you keep them at a good range, pitch high and compensate for the swing, you'll get it, I promise. It's actually not that hard. One of the biggest no-nos you must avoid is getting too close to your target, because then your missiles will scream past like you're seeing here. Do you see how they go wide to the left and then wide to the right? The missiles only converge on the crosshair when you're at roughly the 200-250 meter range. If you get drawn into a close quarters fight, you have to make a decision. Are you going to aim with the left hand side or the right hand side rocket? Honestly, when using anti-vehicle pods, this is the best I've got for you guys. I wish I had more, but these are the basic principles and the rest is just practice. And honestly, sometimes some dumb luck too.
Oh, that could happen.
What I'd recommend you don't do is lean on IR missiles, and here's why. First, you have to stay staring straight at your target for 2.5 seconds, in which time they're going to zero you. And in all probability, we've got a flare on us, so you're not even going to hit us anyway, you're just wasting time. If you are really truly struggling to win aerial fights and you've got the Hokum, you may want to consider switching over to the 30mm cannon. No doubt, this makes aerial fights a lot easier.
Super!
From an air-to-air fight perspective, my only real gripe with them is that, oddly enough, they're substantially weaker than the Nightbird's miniguns are, which is strange when you consider they're a higher caliber or explosive round. But I think people know where I am on the Nightbird by now, so I'm just going to shut up and get on with it. It's in the game, deal with it.
Shots fired! 3 o'clock!
My final air-to-air caution for you is, remember, a pilot that put the time in with the anti-vehicle rocket pods is going to zero you and blow you away before you can beat them.
Ah, shit!
Accurate anti-vehicle pod beats 30mm player every time. It's just what it is. The last thing to know is, from a ground game perspective, you really reduce your DPS against ground targets. You're giving up a lot for the sake of having an easier time in the air, and honestly, my advice to you, take your beating, put your practice in, and you'll be in a much better place. The other reason not to take the IR missiles is because you're giving up the tow. I've covered this extensively on the channel, go check out any of my helicopter videos, but the tow is a transport killer. The beautiful thing about the tow rocket pod combination is that it overpowers the health bar of the transport before it has a chance to be repaired or self-repair. But attack heli pilots, if you jump and you miss, be prepared for it to come after you and it will wreck you. I'm amazed how many players underestimate them. The glorious butt slam. Check out this video if you want some more hind tips. I'm proud of that video. So to close out AA against other helicopters, Nightbird or other, here's the last bit of advice I'd give. if you're committed to a duel, don't run. Ride or die. This player had me over a barrel. One more hit I'd be done, but I tapped him once. Remember, he can take 3 hits, and he's running. That's the second hit. He could have taken me. The exception to this rule, I would say, other than knowing that your Wildcat is nearby, is if there is truly enough distance between you and the helicopter attacking you to make a run for cover, like you're seeing here.
Where the did that come from? Heli is on chill.
Okay, so he's far enough away, so let's make a run for the buildings and try and get up to his altitude. Also, here's another trick. Watch for the direction the fire is coming from, and when you've seen it, you see it's coming from the left-hand side here. Raise yourself up to turn, and then push hard into the direction of the fire. This forces them to overshoot you, turn around, and buys you valuable seconds. When you're this close, it doesn't matter.
Good job, man.
Anyway, I'm not going to sit here and sell a fairy tale that this is how it always goes. More often than not, when a Nightbird gets to jump on me in the open, I'm dead. All you can do is smile, they're part of the game, and remember, this is why the devs gave us Lee. She's here for a reason. Just give him a cold stare. Anyway, enough of all that, let's move on. When you're being targeted by a jet, I'm sure we all know by now that the best thing to do is to actually turn and face it head on. Don't try and run from it, you're just giving it what it wants. And as you may have noticed there, and here's another example, in as much as possible, you should try to close the distance between you and the jet to minimize its opportunity to use its cannons on you and run down the clock if it's going for an IR missile lock. In terms of where to aim, the above-below rules as applied to the attack helicopter earlier apply to the jet. Good. But here's something I've only just clocked, and I'm a little embarrassed it took me this long to figure it out. When jets are having a dogfight, because they're mainly using their cannons, the pursuer literally has to follow in the vapor trails of the player that they are chasing. It tells you exactly where they're going to go.
Russians have shattered Delta.
If you just pay a little bit of attention, you can so easily position yourself right in the flight path. You can see, right? They're coming over the hill. I just have to hover and wait for them.
Good job.
I've covered attack helicopter versus jet extensively in other videos, so let's move on to the last thing I want to talk about, which is the radar missile. These are particularly annoying because the lock is instant. Boom. No warning whatsoever. And if you don't have a flare, you're going to get hit. But here's the thing it took me a while to figure out. They're not as scary as you think. The first missile can be deflected by a flare. The second can be soaked up by your repair function. And the damage is actually very low from them. I'll expand the health bar in a second so you can see for yourself. But the key message here is don't get rattled by a radar missile. Just face the jet and finish them off like you would any other. They're actually quite weak. Alright, let's switch gear and start talking about ground targets. Now I have covered this off before, but just for completion, what you want to do is fire a tow missile and then immediately switch over to your anti-vehicle rocket pods to maximize your uptime. If the player doesn't use APS, keep going until they're dead. Now, it's very unlikely that a tank is just going to sit there and oblige you like that. So, since the introduction of 7.2, you now need to assume that you're not going to be able to one-cycle the vehicle. You're going to have to fly, turn around, and be prepared to finish off the job. Just make sure you allow yourself enough of an overshoot to line up properly to allow the missiles to converge on the target. It also reduces the chance of a rogue M5 catching you out because you're too close. But the real change, however, is going after a Wildcat. Because if you go all in and commit and you don't have a plan about how you're going to get away from it, if you fail to one-cycle it, you're going to get ripped apart. So I had my out worked out in advance down into the valley. This is what happens when you don't have your out worked out in advance. If it's possible, I would consider coordinating with other pilots to go after the Wildcats. It's a lot safer these days.
One dead. Let's go for another.
But at the very least, you should definitely have a gunner on you, and if you are playing gunner, please make sure you back up your pilot and go after the priority target. If you're going after a Wildcat, feel free to open up as soon as they're in range because they don't have APS and you're not going to mess up the missile strike. And if you are going to open up from a bit of a distance, remember, don't overcook your guns. Stick to burst fire. If you do find yourself up against something with APS, simply stop shooting, mark it so you'll be able to find it very easily, do a nice long overshoot, and line yourself up for the second run, and you'll be able to wipe it out pretty easily.
Taking fire on the right!
Okay, just a bit of advice here. If you get an attack helicopter, or indeed a stealth helicopter at spawn, here's what I recommend you do. Drop low, but not too low, I'll explain why in a moment, and start doing a very wide flank around to the back line. But keep your eyes up, don't stare at the floor, because you've got to keep your eye out for Nightbirds, jets, or anything that might have clocked you while you're doing this. Your target is the Wildcat.
They came from the front!
I left this in because it's honest. As you can see, even with a gunner, I didn't one-cycle the Wildcat. 7.2 really did make a difference, and here's another example. In the beginning, we got pushed back, and you can see the Wildcat on the back line. So now I'm going to try again, this time the other way, to see if I can flank all the way around with my gunner, and we can take out the Wildcat and free some space for the jets.
Enemy tank! Situation. U.S. forces asserting control over initial section.
There we go, that went a little bit better. Okay, this is a public service announcement for players who like to use a Stinger launcher. If that's your preference, by all means, you do you. But sincerely, as someone who's been farming players that do this for a long time, when you lock me, I get a directional indicator of where you are. And then when you fire your missile, I get a lovely icon telling me exactly where that missile came from. Which means you and anyone standing next to you is about to die. Whilst I can't see the directional indicator, the gunner also sees the missile when you launch. I would strongly urge you not to shoot a Stinger directly in an attack helicopter. Instead, I would suggest you wait until we've turned around, or at least to the side, so we can't see exactly where you are. And here's a few more examples just to make the point. Remember also, once I've flared, I've got 6 seconds to finish you off, and one Stinger isn't going to shoot me down. So I can afford to take a little bit of a risk before I go back to recharge my flare. Shoot at the back, not at the front. Alright, I think it's about time we moved on to stealth helicopters, part 2. Now before we get on to anything new, let's just run over the fundamentals. And there's 2 ways to take down vehicles. The first is this: start in stealth mode, point the nose down, and drop the bombs in a concentrated cluster to do massive damage, and then come around and finish them off with a tow missile. It is possible to one bomb run a Wildcat. I've never done it, but I know it can be done. Reliable people have told me. One of the big differences between the stealth and the attack helicopters is the maneuverability of the stealth helicopter. It is far, far easier to stay directly above the vehicle you're targeting and to move quite quickly, which makes AGM missiles particularly viable. Much more so than with an attack helicopter. This is particularly fun when you're going after a spawn camping tour as well, because even in 7.2, even though this footage is a little bit older, there's absolutely nothing they can do about you if you stay tight, circling them from above. All they can do is delay the inevitable with APS. Did you hear him panicking trying to switch siege mode off? Yeah, I really recommend you don't do that. As I said at the beginning of this video, God, I hate that glitch. Fix it already. I'm really happy with what I said in my original guide, so in terms of using the 30mm or the 20mm cannons, that is entirely user's preference. The 30s hit harder, but are harder to hit. The 20s hit a lot easier, less damage. What you must absolutely never ever do though is give up your flare. Stealth helicopters, unlike Nightbirds, have to choose between having repair or flare. Never give up flare. I've got great examples in my original guide for this next trick, but again, just to make you aware, if you didn't see it, this is the thing. Using your speed and maneuverability to fly over a heavier target and softening, if not outright killing them with a bomb strike, is a really good tactic for the stealth helicopter.
Beautiful!
And of course, let's not forget how bloody lethal the attack helicopter is against infantry. Who needs a kerosene bomb? But now let's talk about the new. One of the big changes the stealth helicopter has had is it now has 2 tow missiles, and this for me has given rise to an alternative opening, where I open up with the tow missiles because there's no warning to the vehicle I'm attacking, and then come back with the bombs to finish them off. This is actually proving to be very successful for me, and I'm becoming a bit of a convert to this way of doing it. I think a lot of people have forgotten just how powerful the stealth helicopter is as a vehicle hunter, and I have to admit, since 7.2 I'm starting to fall in love with it again because the attack helicopter just isn't so dominant anymore. But here's what I really want to talk about and finish on, and that is the promotion of being a gunner for a stealth helicopter pilot. And first of all, the EMP on the gunner seat, while nerfed to hell, does significantly slow down the turret rotation on the Wildcat, which can create an opportunity for your pilot to get in there and finish it safely. It won't be able to keep up with them. Very well done there, 2 tow missiles into the bomb. Let's take a look at another one.
Tank sighted! It's far!
But to finish out, I just want to let the camera run with a bit of commentary and just watch in one round, look at the score, keep me honest, this all happened in one game. Look at what the gunner can do for the team and for the pilot.
Got it! Scratch one vehicle!
Big contribution to shredding the Nightbird. Take out an engineer on the roof that was threatening us. Tip the scale in our favor against another stealth helicopter, and now let's go after an attack helicopter, see what we can do.
Yes! Got their transport!
Arguably wouldn't have won that without the additional DPS. And don't forget, when you're playing passenger, gunner, you can also jump out and help with repairs, remembering that the stealth helicopter doesn't have repair anymore if you've wisely taken flare. Very useful. Picked off another engineer that was trying to menace us with their launcher. And let's round off with annoying a Wildcat and having one last AA fight.
Enemy vehicle neutralized!
So yeah, it's a seat that you can make massive contribution from. And I know it's not as glorious as being the 30mm gunner for an Apache, particularly with this lovely thermal scope. You're not going to get the thumping kill streaks against infantry, but it's a really important role and one that I think is truly deeply underrated, and I would encourage you, if you guys see an opportunity to back up your stealth helicopter, do so. And so it is we reach the end. If you've made it this far, thank you very much. As I said at the beginning of the introduction, I couldn't have done this video without T4, and certainly not in the time I was able to do it with my very, very limited play time. They're really cool guys, they're very passionate about the game. If you have an opportunity to go over and just give them a little bit of support, cheer them on, please do so, they deserve it. That aside, this is the second of what I said were going to be my final videos for Battlefield 2042. Railguns done, attack stealth helicopters done, only a few more to go, and as always, thank you very much for the support, and I will catch you at the next one. Take care, bye bye.